This is another message from the underground. The voice of Free Earth, brought to you by Seils, straight from the source. You are here now with a special purpose to fulfill. And you are not alone. This is it, family. It's up to us. One planet, one spiritual source, in a multitude of forms. Stay human. Protect the planet. Raise the consciousness.
Hi guys, Paul Seils with another message from the underground in our Actualising Independence series. Today we're up to episode 5 of Actualising Independence, the disease of dependency. Sickness begins when you start believing you need someone or something else to heal you. Is dependency the root of every pain, of every disease, every limitation we experience? What does it truly mean to be independent without being alone, but all one? Jason Reynolds, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Paul. Looking forward to this.
Yeah. And it's
well,
who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen? And it's very apt and appropriate we have this conversation and the synchronicity of it aligning today, given the fact that there's going to be a lot of pissed off people in the world today, and disappointed, frustrated, deflated, all sorts of spaces they're moving through in relation to what's happened or what they perceived happened in the US election just, it was about 3 a.m. our time.
Isn't it great? I think it's great. The amount of people that are pissed off, angry, and frustrated. It's a real call to attention, isn't it? It's and definitely what we want to go into today.
Yeah, it's definitely a reality check, and that's for sure. And a lot of people have been following different narratives and different, social media influences, etc. And a lot of as I mentioned to you, I have the experience of sort of being, what do you call it, sensitive or empathic or intuitive or whatever, and getting up and being able to feel what's happening in the world before I even sort of look at my phone or a computer or whatever. So I can feel this sort of this angst, this frustration, this disappointment, and anger. But I think definitely anger is an experience or an emotion that needs to be experienced or vented or whatever. But it's actually about processing those emotions in a healthy way rather than in a destructive way.
Absolutely. And I think process is a very important aspect where we need to get out of practices that people look to, benefit themselves, elevate themselves. Practices, the word says it all. It's not really committing to it. But when we have a process, we have a starting point, we have a definitive action that we become masterful of, and we have a definitive point of completion so that we can move forward in our life and start to be the creator rather than, relying upon in so many forms, all the ways in which we've given ourselves away to structures that have been created. Maybe they manipulate us, these structures, these things that we oppose, but ultimately they're there to fill a void that we're not taking up ourselves. So, ultimately here, this is about an individual and the individual recognizing their significance in this entire experience. We've become so dependent upon all of these things that are, presented for safety, for security, for our best interests. But for many of us, we've got to start at the reality. Do we know what it is that we want? Do we understand what we are? And if we don't understand what we are and what we want, how can we actually align and understand what it is that serves us rather than being caught up in the common narrative and generalized ideas of many systems like science, medical, financial, psychology, all of these things that treat us as a generalized form that don't allow us to find true integrity in our own life, to make our own decisions and find discernment.
Yes.
This is something that is, absolute. And I think the very nature of going through pain and reaction, whatever may be brought, and people jumping off bandwagons because the team didn't kick the goal or didn't win at this particular moment, is a core aspect of our own self that we need to take responsibility for, to recognize the long-term effect of our life rather than the temporary reliefs that we look for from other external practitioners to help us fix that niggle within our own body so we can go back to feeling comfortable again. Yeah. This is about being able to navigate and utilize chaos as a fuel for life, because every single thing that we do, that we want to create, that we want to become, begins with chaos. And if we don't understand how to actually move ourselves through, navigate, you know, that there's this talk that we're a ship lost at sea, that we're, you know, and there's some definitive aspects of that, but we need to learn to navigate ourselves. We need to bring ourselves back to our own truth, not getting caught up in and looking to others to save us. But when we're engaged and integrated in what we are and what we determine what we are, it's at that particular point that we can start to move forward in our life, not in the service of people who don't understand what it is that they want, which many of us look to help the world, but we're trying to help a group of people that don't actually know what it is they demand. So no matter what's presented, it's never going to be satisfactory. It's never going to serve them.
That's very interesting you say that, because for some of them, that's their motto. The external power structures is order through chaos. And I know we've touched on this previously in the series as well. And that's because of the fact that these other external structures have the ability to be far more organized. They're organized. They are the ones that are organized through the, you know, the 0.1% of the population have the ability to be organized and create order through the chaos. And I think it's our difficulty to be with that uncertainty, and that chaos can really be our shortcomings.
Oh, perfect. Absolutely. I mean, that is, you know, until a lot of us learn and a lot of us become aware of certain things that we don't like, and we become researched and we have aha moments, and we hold on to those moments as if they're, you know, an eternal truth. This is about temporary relief, you know, in being accepted for a moment. But, you know, we absolutely need to come to a place where we can start to recognize ourselves beyond these structures, but recognize those structures that they create belonging for us. And belonging allows us to be accepted, you know, for a period of time, until we dig deeper into that thing that we're belonging to, that it doesn't actually serve us. But for many of us, how do we actually get back out of that web that we've jumped into?
Okay, can I just ask you really quickly, what are the structures that you're sort of referring? Are you talking about like the monetary systems, the political systems?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a simplicity of, I'll give an example here, is these types of systems that have been brought about to provide authority and direction and security in our life. What they represent is organization. So they're an opportunity that we have not taken within our own self. But what they've done is taken very simple process. So let's just look at the medical system. Now, when the coronavirus, you know, whatever you want to call it, came out.
I think the first case in the US was this week last year, 12 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when that came out, there was, you know, a whole range of doctors espousing all of this understanding of virology and how many viruses and millions that we have with this and how the immune system works. You know, this is all interesting, but it's irrelevant because these things are in service to our particular capacity to move forward. So the confusion that exists in the medical system that the common person can't understand and then can't apply and then cause them to rely upon supposed experts that have been indoctrinated and schooled in complexity rather than simplicity. The thing is that exists within all of us and all of these needs to understand the body just to be able to chart what it does. It changes all of the time. There's new advancements, new ideas. It all is there to confuse. And for the common individual to try and find sovereignty, it's about recognizing simplicity and having the authority to go beyond what other people are saying is true.
Yes.
So that requires a deep connection. So let's just look at it this way: is law in itself and the three, you know, the common law. It's simple, you know. But what if we look in the very nature of legislation and the way in which the legal system has been created, not the lawful one, but the legal system has been created, it is all about confusion. You know, same within medicine, same within psychology. There is no definitives because it is an incomplete system. But we allow ourselves to not speak up ahead of that confusion because we don't want to look like we don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
we want to have an opinion.
Yeah, because you have to pay someone else for their knowledge, that they know more knowledge than what you know, so that you can hopefully have a better position.
For sure. I mean, and if anyone's ever been to a lawyer or an accountant and expected them to give them definitive advice, they'll find themselves very disappointed.
Yeah.
And it's not about the individual, it's about them believing in the fact that they've been schooled in something, that they know what's right, and then they sit in this false state of authority because other people release their own authority rather than schooling themselves. These individuals are service to you. They're not there as advisors to you. And that's the same in every person that's part of a structure that's been indoctrinated through a schooling system. It doesn't mean that there's not a significant amount of people that are so brilliant in all those areas, but it's not because of the study they've done, it's what they've come aware of within themselves through that study and their ability to be able to speak truly because of it. So let's just look at this. Within each of us, we have a belief system. Now, belief systems, they exist to take away the simplicity. Belief systems can be beneficial, but they can also be demonstrative and they can be destructive. The thing is, they are opposing and contradictory to each other. Now, that is when we sit in a disconnected state, when we don't understand how to receive our own attention and be in a state of connection, which is life. Now, those belief systems have been either purposely designed, and I don't want to give too much, I suppose, credit to those that have designed it. But what I would suggest is all of these systems represent the belief systems we hold upon within ourselves, which is confusion. When we start to take control of our life and start to make decisions, and decision means to cut away what is not relevant. It is to take a direction and move forward with the things that don't serve us. So when we elevate ourselves above our belief systems is when we stop believing in the past, be fearful of the future, but we become present to this particular moment without understanding how to take the next step forward. And this is, you know, that might be a lot to take in, that little passage we just went through, but it is all a representation and always will be of our own self. And when we can start to realize that, you know, our dependency and it is the cause of our sickness, but it's what we have given away in the choices that we have made not to honor our own self for the fear of how we may affect someone else negatively.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you should say that. And talking about that as well, I mean, it's some people might say in that regard, Jason, it's overly simplistic and perhaps even a little bit naive, in that there's a place for a lot of things that are externalizations, including, you know, whether it's, you know, there's a time and place for pharmaceutical industries or healing devices and modalities and that sort of thing as well. There's a time and place for all those things. And, you know, if you're hurt and you're damaged or you're injured, you're not going to solve that by just sitting down and thinking it away or wishing it away or
yeah, but wouldn't that be, that's just a ridiculous concept that if anyone actually sat there and considered that they would recognize it. You know, like, to sit there and say, well, geez, if I'm going to just sit here and do nothing because I'm not going to buy into those systems, I mean, good luck in life. And I don't mean to be offensive, I mean to be truthful. The representation that we're looking at here is, people will often say about, you know, well, I'll need surgery. I mean, that's where medical, you know, service becomes great and it's required and it's non-intrusive. And maybe that can be true for certain people as they come to their own state of awakening. But I'm not talking about dealing with the problems that exist. I'm looking to the longer term solution, which is when we are in an aligned and integrated state and we can maintain that, which means dissolving such fallacies of our educational system, dissolving fallacies of authority that we give. It's about the individual recognizing, first of all, in life, their responsibility is them and coming to understand and love themselves so they can express themselves openly, authentically, and therefore accept others for doing the same. It's like when we expect other people to change and we go, they're never going to change, they're never going to see it, that they're not woke or they're not whatever it is that they want to identify. It's just simply that individual highlighting that they're not accepting their own change. Because if we don't accept change in others, or we're believing that other people won't change, it is just a reflection of where we are not changing ourselves and not accepting that change. And that just depends on whether we want to take responsibility for that or not. If we don't, we will blame and we will identify others as not making a change. So we have the ultimate power. You know, the very nature of the Constitution of Australia recognizes the Crown as the ultimate power. And most people would believe that the Crown is the Queen. The Crown is not the Queen. The Crown is the supreme power, and it's recognized in our Westminster system as God. Now, many of us don't realize that at the legal, you know, basis of our Constitution and many constitutions around the world is the Bible. It's a legal document. The actual second power and the first realized formative physical power is the individual. They have the supreme power. They are the supreme power. But The thing is we have not accepted our significance in life, as we have not come to understand and embrace ourselves. We have been usurped by confusion and misunderstanding. So this is where, you know, the queen sits beneath us, but what us requires is organization. What us requires as an individual to individualize and express our own self with the preparedness to be wrong, the preparedness to listen. You know, recognizing ourselves is not enforcing upon another, it is contribution, and contribution through elevation. So as an individual, eventually our greatest responsibility then becomes our family. And for some of us, we don't have a direct biological descendant, you know, or a partner that we're living with, but our family represents around us in many different ways. But it is first being able to navigate and be able to find truth in that space before we start trying to, you know, excitedly go out and want to change other people's lives. Look, there's many, you know, from social workers to coaches to, you know, there's systems of NLP and a whole range of things that falsely indoctrinate people into a belief that they're able to now direct other people's lives.
Yeah.
You know,
well, I was going to say there, Jason, as well, because I mean, you know, for a lot of us, and including, you know, concepts about NLP and people using it during sales processes, a lot of it just seems to be just another form of manipulation. It's getting someone to do something else that they might necessarily want to do freely by their own choice.
Yeah, I mean, look, and that's a level of it for sure, and there's no doubt some benefit in it. But there's benefit in satanic practices, and there's benefit in all sorts of stuff. But it's a matter of understanding you as an individual. How let's just look at this. That when you know,
I was just going to say, obviously, people that are in those satanic practices obviously believe there's some benefit in it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it, right?
For sure. And everyone who stands there to oppose them and say that they're wrong, well, maybe they're true. But the thing is, by pointing a finger and complaining about it, nothing is going to change. You need to provide a solution and an example which inspires people to want to go down your direction rather than trying to enforce them. You know, it's ironic that many people complain about the government and the corruption, and then they want to tell people how they should be living and what the right way is, and then argue about it when they're enforcing their own beliefs upon it. We've got to recognize the irony and the confusion that we sit in. And this is what we're saying before. We've got to accept our ignorance. Until we accept our ignorance, we're not going to be able to see and accept our significance. You know, we should always be coming from a place that I don't know.
Yeah.
But with the intention to understand. And then the true responsibility of the individual comes in, how do I navigate myself forward? You know, every time that I ask someone else to assist, you know, it helps me a little bit. But it must always come back to the supreme power, which is you. And until we step into that seat, it's like a corporate board.
Yeah.
The very nature, which is so defunct in this country, and I've worked a lot with boards, and you know, the very basis is when someone steps into that space, they are no longer the person that they know their name to be or the life that they have outside of it. They're in service to that entity. And to be able to be non-biased and to be able to be serving in that particular space is a very high caliber capacity. But that has been lost. But also within those boards, it's to recognize that there is a chairman or a chairwoman, or whatever you want to call it. But a person is in control. Now, we are the chairman of our own life. If we're not sitting in that seat, decisions are still made and we are still responsible for them. And this comes where our ignorance is, that we can eventually come to recognize where we're not sitting in our seat, where we're not making decisions for ourselves, that then we can go, wait a second, I don't want that. I don't want to live this way. I don't want to experience those things. So I'm going to get back in that seat and I'm going to start making decisions for me. So, you know, life is, you know, our dependency is the basis of our sickness. And I'm not talking here from a temporary aspect. I'm talking about a short-term journey that people take to reorganize the structure of their own life, to be able to recognize we have been, no matter how intelligent we think we are, no matter how capable or connected or intuitive we think we may be, we are indoctrinated in many different ways. You know, what frees us from indoctrination is one thing. It is the ability to reconcile and receive our attention. And I don't want to skip across this point as just, oh, well, that was an interesting point. This is the absolution of everything. Our ability to receive our own attention is what provides us with freedom, because it's in that particular space that we can start to create, that we can recognize the truth. And as we accept our own attention, we start to not aspire to something that is love. We experience love. We don't work towards love.
Yeah, can I just say with that as well, like some people, as far as the society and the collective concerned, Jason, have collapsed that somewhere along the lines, and I get what you're saying, and people have collapsed it along the line somewhere of like being self-indulgent, being selfish, being narcissistic, just it's all about me, me, me. It's really just sort of unpicking the construct between those two things about, I understand what you're saying, but can you just explain a little bit clearer about, particularly as far as, and the irony is that we are on social media and people are listening, but there seems to be this sort of, this dysfunction, this toxicity of narcissism where it's like, we've become this sort of parasitic entity that's like just fully consumed by itself. What's the difference between the attention and the consummation of, the self just being about the self and for the self?
Presence. That's it. It's presence. It's presence to that. It's not, look, is a narcissist the person identified as one or the person identifying? I mean, just because a word is being created, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think it's an absolute level of self-love. And it's how you use these things. Like 666 identifies the number of the beast, but it's also identified as life. It's how you become indoctrinated by what side of the coin that you choose to see something from.
Yeah. And you're right with what you're saying in relation to quantum physics.
It's in many occasions.
Say again?
I was just going to say, it's in many occasions that, and a common one is when we find joy in our life and we go and meet a friend, and that particular friend is not so much finding joy in their life, they're actually quite in a bad spot. And we're so excited to get there and share this, amazing relationship that we've fallen into. And we've seen it before in people's eyes that they're sparkling.
Yeah.
But then you turn up and your friend is, life's about to end, that their partner's just cheated on, their business has just been lost. And you find yourself censoring your life, censoring your expression, where the very dynamic is that the reason why you've just had that experience and why you're meeting with this person who is now down is to share your story openly and unapologetically, to give them direction and example to move forward. But you can see in these simple practices where we buy into this idea of compassion, that I need to do the right thing by them, that's an arrogant interruption of someone else's life. When we show love for ourselves, and we truly do, we cannot be anything else but love to someone else. Sometimes it's difficult for people to accept.
Yeah.
But ultimately, when they do go and reflect and they get past their own self-judgment, they start to recognize in time the capacity for humility to be able to go back and go, wow, I really appreciated what it was and the example you provided me. But we're not here to degenerate our own self because other people have chosen to do so. We're the individualization and actualization of our own self, and we've got a choice to do that, or we've got a choice to get on the boat and be part of a citizenship where we become caught up in the laws that other people make for us.
Yeah.
Just imagine, as you said at the start of this, there's a whole range of people that are somewhat disappointed because a couple of the wheels have fallen off the supposed bandwagon that they've been investing into.
Yeah.
What could have been created during that time now becomes very apparent to those people. Like if I just spent those last 9, 12 months, 3 months, 3 weeks on actually moving forward myself, what could I have created?
Yeah. And
there becomes the real question. Here's an opportunity, jump off the Trump train, jump onto it, follow whatever it is that you believe that makes you feel good.
That just might make them more pissed off though, Jason.
Well, but who cares, Paul? This is the whole point. When I say who cares, I'm speaking about people that want to bring me down, that want to bring themselves down. If you want to buy into that, that's fine. If it makes you uncomfortable about me being comfortable with myself, well, that's fine, and that's something you need to do. It's not my business. We've had so many conversations where people of great wisdom, of great heart, that focus their lives on trusting people and they move forward and they offer their hand, have been restricted because of their certain language of things that they're not supposed to do. The concept of gaslighting, I mean, what a notion. These types of things just need to be dissolved from, people are clumsy, people make mistakes, but it's a humility to recognize that when they move through and they start to discover themselves, geez, that's a very challenging place to be in, because the world is focused upon you being a part of a community, a common unity. And they expect people to come into a community and a common unity without understanding themselves. And that's the very confusion, the cycle that we keep going around. Where we go one, we go all. But who are you to go where? And what is the all that we're buying into? You know, it's not about saying fuck you to anyone else. This is definitely not the case. This is about when you become engaged in yourself, and these words, like you're saying, that have been hijacked, like, you know, being self-indulgent, you're selfish, you're even things like white privilege, all of this stuff. You know, take it as a compliment. You know, when someone says, geez, you're so selfish, well, thank you. Isn't that great? You're the one that determines what they're saying. Otherwise, if you don't, you become the result of how they judge you. And there's nothing that any of us will ever escape. If we want to be who we are, more deliberately what we are, we have to accept that we will expose ourselves in places that we have not been. This is the journey of life. To do the same over and over again is death. But if we continue to move in our own direction and we come to accept ourselves, what we're going to find is that we are going to have opposition. Because in that opposition, that is the perfect contrast that we are providing, because people want to do things because we're doing it together. But when you start to get judged, it's because you are going to expose yourself, and to expose yourself, to explore yourself, it is impossible to not find judgment of those closest to you, most importantly, but then those people around you. And that is a marker that we can use as fuel and be thankful for, rather than like, why do people have to be so mean? Why do people not see who I am? Why don't they accept me as I am? Because the fact is, I don't yet accept myself as I am. So become humble to that. Yeah. I know I'm brilliant, but how often do we have these conversations about talking about our brilliance without people justifying, well, you know, I don't want to sound this way and I don't want to sound that way.
Well, you got tickets on yourself, Jason Reynolds.
Oh, what a great thing. You know, like, what an amazing thing to sit there inspired when someone talks about this great idea that they've got and they want to bring to the world, rather than going, yeah, and playing the safe advocate of, I don't know, maybe you should check. Like, go for it. I mean,
that guy's a bit full of himself.
Yeah, great. What a great person. You know, these are the things that for many of us, we've come to accept as a commonality, like that, you know, well, you can't be like that. Well, Jason, you shouldn't speak that way. Well, okay, thank you.
Might upset people.
Yeah, well, look, let's just remember what the real definition of being selfish is. Selfish is expecting other people to live your way. That's what selfish is. But to be truly self-effacing, to be truly self-evident, is about an individual having the courage to explore themselves and express themselves in such a way that is not apparent, that is unique, and that is different. This is what the real truth of all of this is about. You know, and this is what we face, you know, moving forward. Yes, if people had their fingers crossed that there was going to be, you know, a beautiful movie playing out last night, that there was going to be arrests, and you know, and they've been listening to. I saw something that I listened to that, you know, and I treat it as entertainment. It's an extension. It's not the purpose of my life. It's an extension of it. And when I listen to that, and I see people that have been, you know, go for it. This is great. I love what you got to say for months and months, and then suddenly turn around and going, you're a deceitful person, you're a liar, you know, I'm never going to follow you again. You know, this is where we've got to look at. That's what community creates. People that buy in because they want the acceptance of others, they want to belong before belonging to themselves. So, you know, I don't expect in my life, and it's been challenging at times, to be celebrated by others. I expect to be honest to myself, you know, and that doesn't mean I have a lot of friends. It's quite the opposite. You know, I really, you know, look to the space within my own self of how I, you know, feel within myself. I mean, we've all got our own challenges, but our challenges are mostly, you know, constructed around our inability to make decisions. You know, we find ourselves with the capacity to make decisions. If we develop a level of discernment where we cannot be deceived, where corruption doesn't exist, we are the ones that espouse that destroy that. We don't sit there and set up a charter to say, let's get rid of these corrupt politicians. Wait a second, let's get rid of the corruption within me that allows me to believe in the ignorance that they've put upon me.
Yeah.
You know, this is about a movement. So, you know, let's look at, you know, the real cause of an opposition of life. You know, and let's be clear on this. The opposition of life is not death. The opposition of life is apathy, mediocrity, and being incomplete in my ability to not finish what I started.
I would even say also maybe even resignation.
Well, I mean, look, you can look at it in whatever way as far as an individual relates to those things, but ultimately each of those things, and being incomplete is the opportunity that we forgive at each particular time to be the creator. As we get to a particular point, many of us start things, but just look in our life and recognize how many things we have open that are not finished. And then we start something else to avoid the completion of that previous thing. But if we recognize when we complete something, when we resolve something, the energy that is freely gifted to us is what's always been there. It gives us impetus, and it is the very makings of inspiration. If we understand the dynamics of how that works, we can move forward. But this all starts with a simple capacity of being able to let go and release every single day. You know, we go and sit in the bathroom each day and we do what we've got to do, because if we don't, we're not going to be in pain. The thing is, we are mentally and energetically in significant amounts of pain that we've dulled ourselves down by ideas of not being selfish, because we're not exploring ourselves, because we're not choosing to decide to cut off those things in our life that are no longer serving of us.
I was just going to say there, Jason, I almost thought you were going to say we go and sit in a bar, and I know that's what some people do to deal with it as well. You know, to deal with that resignation, or to deal with that disappointment, you know, for us to chemically induce or use some sort of addiction as a distraction, or to not have to face it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's just a comment that's there that's sending positive vibrations to all, you know, which is a nice sentiment. And I don't want to dissolve what it is that is there, but I want you to understand this, that in many of our life, we've got a lot of great intentions. And if we, you know, we've got these great wisdoms and principles, I've got to do more of that. I've got to be more loving. I've got to speak to myself more. I need to go spend some time in nature. I need to love people. I need to accept them. There's thousands of them. You know, we can never possibly direct and be all of those things at once. So let's just recognize that all of those things that are beautiful and brilliant within us come from when we become actualized and we become integrated within our own self. We don't need to send positive vibrations to all when we are integrated within our own self, because it is a native response. It happens automatically. And this is what we're looking about, and getting our power back is about creating habits in our life, not practices. Habits are effortless actions. And when we decide the habits we have, and we don't become indoctrinated or caught up or conditioned into the habits that other people have created, we start to live a life that's simple. We don't need to remind ourselves, geez, I've got to do that. Wait, it's 10 o'clock. I need to sit down and do my practice. And now I've got to go off and I've got to spend 2 hours doing my marketing, and I've got to do this. And that is not life. That is obligation. That is expectation of what you're supposed to do to become significant in your own life, where the real truth is being able to give concert and audience to the voice that exists within you. And, you know, for many, it's like, well, how the hell do I do that? And if I do, how do I trust that? And if I don't trust it every single time, well, then I don't trust it. And I've got to accept that. If I'm not prepared to ask a question, is it my highest good to be with my partner or move forward or to close this business? And the biggest questions of my life. I mean, we should be questioning and being present to the very nature of where I should be at any particular moment in time. But the thing is, these are not practices. These are just being in alignment, in presence to our own self, in the same way that we are gentle and nurturing of a child, and we give them space to be able to express themselves, and patience as they're stuttering and trying to get some words out. You know, we need to do that for our own self as we are beginning our own life of connection with what we are, not who we've been led to believe. I mean, the who is our ego and it's our identity. The what is the individualized capacity of what we are, that is only here, and we're the rarest capacity in the world. That there is nothing like us that's ever been. I mean, forget about gems and stones and all the rest of it. We are the most rarest capacity, the expression that there has ever been. And if we can recognize the supreme value of that, we then need to build a structure within our own self. And this structure, let me talk about structure. This is, moves beyond dependency, which is scaffolding. So let's imagine a body of water that's a puddle. Now, it becomes a river when it has a structure to flow through, and the bigger that structure, the greater the amount of water that it can hold and direct for purpose. Now, the thing is that the more structure we have, the greater the discipline we have to maintain that. That is what freedom is. But this is where habits also come in. When we can make that a habit to identify the things that serve us, to sit in concert with ourselves and indulge, but what do I actually want? This is what I want to do. But how immediately the thoughts come in, but if I do that, then I won't be able to do this, and I'll have to give that up, and it'll offend these people. We've got to stop thinking about consequence. We've got to be more about presence. This is what I want to do, and allow yourself to move through this particular space. This is what our truth is, only our truth. The amount of times that I hear that truth is a common thing and it's an absolute thing, I mean, good for you. I could never think of anything that would be more lacking in life.
It's interesting, Jason, you should say that in relation to truth. And I had the fortune of spending a day down in Victoria. It's probably about 10 years ago now, with the Dalai Lama. I had two experiences in 1 week. I got to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger, and also to be with the Dalai Lama, which was like the converse dualities in 1 week. But the primary message that I got out of that day with the Dalai Lama is there are no absolutes.
Yeah. No, I've heard a lot of people, and even I had an interview at one stage, and someone projected onto me that there is only one truth. And if that's what works for an individual, that's great. And it's sometimes, when I was a kid, I was pulled into a religious fundamentalist association. It was interesting, and I learned a lot from it. And I was speaking at tongues at one stage, and I could see people in that they believed that was their answer. And for many that still is, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not. There's no right way. It's just understanding what it is that serves me and how it is that I move forward. What someone hears the word God and becomes triggered by it because they want to use the word universe or consciousness instead. It is about recognizing and accepting that we all have a difference in the way in which we express things. We don't need to change someone to make ourselves comfortable, and that's this very degeneration and impossibility of community. Community that is based upon an individual not being actualized. We're not going to achieve that in this generation, but we can certainly start it. I'm not sitting here thinking, what can I achieve by the time I turn over? Wow. I'm looking at what's the legacy that is going to be left that is going to be eternal. And that comes down to the individual moving back to the land, and becoming aware of the capacities that they have. I mean, we've spoken about this before, and it might have been a question you had, but about, things like med beds and Healy devices.
Yes.
I mean, I've been inundated with people saying, "Oh, you will love this because of what you're into." And look, that is no different to a pharmaceutical. And if you believe that to be the case, and if you're getting benefit temporarily, great.
As far as an externalization is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. What it does is avoid the very supreme power that we have within us in order to move through those things and come to a deeper understanding of ourselves. Yeah,
you're just going to create some more pissed off people.
I'm not concerned, Paul. I'm here to provide a presentation that will resonate with some, that other people will be contrasted and angry, and that's fine. But as long as it brings about change, I'm happy with that. As I said, I'm not here to create friends. I'm here to be an example, to express myself, and hopefully other people express themselves. I don't expect them to agree. I'm talking from an observation of what I've seen, where I've observed through work that I do, that 100% of the people overcome any type of condition, illness or disease because they become aware of themselves. They don't need any outside interruptions, and interruptions is a key thing to our dependency, is that we start to believe in what it is that goes on outside of us, rather than, I mean, how ironic it may be for an individual when they sit down and they finally have some time and space for themselves, and they want to start moving forward in a direction, the interruptions that come. And they believe those interruptions to be, that's kind of strange. That, I tried to work and I tried to get something done, but I just suddenly all these things happen, emergencies occurred. They are a part of our habits and our conditioning. They are here, to develop. So I've gone completely blank. I happened to read read one of the.
You got someone that's angry there already, but now you're talking about externalization of devices, etc., like med beds and external healing devices.
There is nothing wrong with someone who has found themselves in a state of confusion and in a state of disappointment and degeneration of their own physical being, that they're now requiring surgery, or they're now requiring addressing from cancerous forms or some sort of condition that is overcoming them. There's nothing wrong. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but what I'm suggesting is that it's not a solution to provide a level of dependency and trust in something like that. Because now, look, if someone has cancer, if they don't take responsibility that they created it, nothing will ever change, and we'll continue to keep having sympathy to this invisible illness that suddenly becomes of people. We've got to until we take responsibility for that we created that we formed that it only exists in me because of me. It's not genetic. It's not because my dad had it. It's a conditioning that I've taken on and accepted the same behaviors that they had that's created that same thing within me. To get caught up in the ridiculous nature of medical science, this is, I don't need to get caught up, and I don't need to agree with anyone on this. I have seen and created my own understanding of awareness, where I believe to empower individuals so that they're never caught up wasting their life running around some structure like a hospital. To me, I wouldn't even know what the inside of one looks like, and I don't intend to. The very purpose of our own self is to be able to recognize our own responsibility. If we don't recognize and become truthful in suggesting, you created this, they are never going to look at the ways in which they created it in order to unravel that, because once they recognize that they created something that was so degenerative in their own being, something might just click that goes, well, fuck, what if I wasn't pulling myself apart? What could I create? And then the challenge comes, the exposure of the individual. Can I deal with what people are going to say about me? Will they accept me? What happens if this occurs, as we start to consider our very own creation and significance? And when we move back to life from a state of simplicity, where we focus on the one thing that we are here to do, not having opinions, not getting caught up in information and irrelevances in our own life, but to sit in our own simplicity and to understand what it is that we are here to bring forward. We don't need to be an expert in every other field. We simply need to become courageous enough to embrace our own. Now, I'm not saying that is easy. It is simple, but it is far from easy, because of what we have got to accept is what we have ingested up until now. Now, if I'm, heavily overweight, I can't just say, well, I want to be thin, and that's the way it's going to be. I have to recognize what I've ingested from my thoughts about the way food is and my relationship to it and why I eat. And then I've got to allow myself to purge what it is that is within there in order to start to make decisions that support me. If not, I need to embrace the fact that I'm overweight, and I need to become at ease with that if that's the way I'm going to choose to live my life. And I've got to recognize there's a possibility that I might not have the capacity to move and experience things and love myself in ways, if I wasn't like that, if that was what I was hoping to be. So, there's it's just, to me, it's amazing how people can feel when they know that someone else is truly listening to them, when they are understood, when they are truly received. There is a love that comes in that particular space, and to me that provides the greatest example when you see someone who's been holding back, but they eventually just come out and speak outwardly and openly, and they let go and they share and trust in that particular place to allow you in. That example is what we are there to do for our own self. I mean, imagine sitting, and for most of us, just not in meditation. I don't really rate meditation as a practice until we can come to communicate with our own self, to stop, to be able to be present to our own self. Meditation is a very, very advanced practice that has been normalized and confused, and it provides temporary relief. but it is about our individual capacity on how we actually utilize that to move forward, to create and allow what is coming through us to be authentic. And that requires action. And our action, I mean, to me, this is just all about, you know, we want to talk about consciousness. Consciousness is just the speed at which we act. You know, and that speed at which we act is determined by the truth that we have in the simplicity of our approach to life. What it is that serves me, the processes that I move through when I find darkness in my life, when I find challenge in my life. Freedom exists in my ability to deal with the darkest moments of my life. We, you know, our capacity to know, and that's the only question I would suggest people listening need to answer, is how do I deal with the darkest moments of my life? How do I navigate through the unknown? Because that is what's going to happen when I choose to start creating and moving forward in my life out of the hospice that I find myself in of being comfortable with life. That I need to be able to direct myself forward. You know, that means navigating into the unknown. And in order to do that is dealing with the greatest darkness that I have not even approached yet, because I haven't moved into that space. We cannot know what's going to come, and we cannot sit there and go, but if I do this, will I have to experience that? Will I have to let go of that? That is unknown. That will have to come at this particular time, and you'll be questioned at a particular moment. Which path do you want to take? And for some of us, we need to trust in the very truth of our native truth that exists, is every single thing exists to support us. And when we can become aligned and we can become integrated with that truth, that everything exists to support us, just at this moment, I don't understand how it supports me, but if my truth, my undeniable truth is that everything exists to support me, I will then find evidence to support my momentum forward and my growth, and I will not be caught up in the distractions of sickness, of disease, of conversations about other people and what they did to me and how that should happen. This is about an individual starting to step in that capacity. I mean, and look, quite openly and expressing it. That's why I have found that it took me a lot of years that I exist, is that when people are uncertain in how to move into that space, that's why I am here, and that's what I intend to offer. I intend to be here in such a space that I can teach people something so they never ever need me. You know, this is about, to me, the whole life is about teaching independence. You know, this is about an individual, and all, you know, if you have children in school, I mean, the very questions you want to be looking at within that school is what they are teaching. Is it about so that child can do without them? Is there practices that are here that are allowing that child to move forward without the reliance of schooling? And then the idea, well, going to uni after, well, that's just dependency again. You know, the very nature of what about exposing yourself? And, you know, as parents, I think it's one of the most rewarding and challenging things. But, you know, the dependency that we have on what people have done beforehand and how we should be as a parent, and the dependency that comes from the child, you know, and our responsibilities there, geez, it's a great way to expose our own life.
People sort of get, you know, feel nourished about having other people depend on them.
Oh, absolutely. And look, but let's just look at that, Paul. It's a really good point, because, you know,
it's people like want to be wanted or needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or desired, or whatever you want to call it.
People can own, and this is an impossibility, a mathematical fact, if you like. But it's about getting to a place of energetic mastery where you can actually discern this for yourself, because it's an unseen thing, but we've got to get into the language of being able to communicate with the unseen. Excuse me, because that is where life is. So for our ability, you know, to recognize when someone else gives us attention, we can only receive the amount of love that we have reconciled within ourselves. If someone sees a potential or a brilliance or a beauty within us, and this is where, you know, you see at times, and it confuses people, where you have a beautiful looking, handsome or stunning person, but they're completely insecure with themselves because they don't see what they are that other people see, and they're not able to receive that attention. Some people are brilliant in the way in which they express themselves so openly and clearly, but they don't see that. That's just who they are. So until we come to accept ourselves as what we are, we will not receive that attention, and we'll continue to keep driving it from others and expecting it from others. And, you know, so we need to come to if we want to be able to be graceful in receiving what other people have to offer us and to be able to receive all of the gifts that exist around us, we have to accept that in ourselves first. Because otherwise what we'll find is that smothering. We'll find that that's intrusive. It's like if someone loves us more than they love ourselves, that becomes what someone may consider an intrusion into our own life. It's uncomfortable. And the irony is that that particular individual is wanting love for themselves as well. So, you know, we are the determining factor of the outside world. Not the world is the determining factor of us. But when we start to create a momentum that it is unbridled in our own life, that it's wild, it doesn't matter what the government is doing or what they intend to do. It's interesting what they're doing, but it doesn't form a reason or a purpose for the direction that I take. It's just interesting.
So just checking in the comments there as well. It is interesting, and that's one of my favorite words is interesting. It's multifaceted and multi-directional. But can I just go back to the conversation as well? And I think it's appropriate to bring it at this point in time. And you mentioned it earlier in the conversation around the word sovereignty. And I know a lot of people have, and I know we've talked around aspects of it, and a lot of people have subjective interpretation of what they think the word sovereignty means. And I know for a lot of us, we're heading in that direction. But I'm just wondering whether you can speak into that as well in relation to sovereignty. Is sovereignty of the individual, sovereignty of communities, of countries, etc.
Yeah. It starts with the point that it can only exist external to us once it's accepted within us. So, you know, I'll just go on the other side of it. Dependency occurs when we give away something to other people that we don't understand how to recreate within our own self. So for many of us, when we find things of value, and things of value might be peace in our life, and we have found peace in our life, what seems to happen is a whole range of people seem to attract or flock or are magnetized to us because we have peace. And we suddenly, what we do in that state of wealth that we have created. I mean, wealth is the management of space, is the acceptance of space in our own life. When we don't have space in our life, that is the definition of not being wealthy. So when we have peace in an abundance in our own life, other people come into that space, and because we might feel guilty or we might feel that we need to actually help that individual out because we have peace in our own life, if we don't understand how to recreate peace, we become dependent upon life because we are giving away something we don't yet understand how to recreate, how to maintain in our own life. So our ability to create internally is what brings about independence. So if we can't create internally, now creation, let's look at what creation is. Creation is first about establishing a communication within our own self to understand what it is that we exist for and what it is that we want to create, the why in our own life. So we've got to develop a point of trust within our own self. So that trust is that I have a connection and an insight and an intuitive capacity. And look, intuition is just the direction of attention. Intuition is not something special that people have, and it's been pushed in that way. But intuition is part of the senses that we have at a noble level of our energetic being.
We're not going to leave anyone upset today. Everyone gets a turn.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not sure. I'm not feeling, but so the thing is with the direction of, you know, our intuitive capacity is our ability to discern information or energy as information. And it's our ability when we have a point of trust within ourselves that we have developed over time, patiently, in being humble in our own self, not needing to come straight away and react to life. Mm-hmm. But when we develop that humility to be able to discern that information is relevant to us and what is not relevant, then gives our capacity to start to operate independently. And as we move forward, we start to create a habit where we let go of external forms of information, but we start to trust internally. That is a process. That takes time because we've got to recognize in our own, again, humility, that wait a second, the reason I don't have that capacity is not because I don't know, it's not because I'm incapable, it's not because I'm useless in any way, it's because, wait a second, I've been schooled to believe this is the truth and that this is a fantasy. So I'm going to have to go through and unpluck the weave that is part of the fabric of my life And I need to recreate, re-embroid the fabric of my being in order to actually start to trust that. So when I start to trust that, I can then come from a point of discernment when I can have people opposing me and going, well, wow, that's amazing. It's really brilliant. But you know what, for me, this is the direction. And to be able to stand in that truth again, we're going to fall over. But, you know, big part of this is learning to get back up. You know, if we want to talk simple, you know, all we need to understand in life is how to get back up, because we're always going to fall over. Whilst we're walking and moving, we can navigate. But so once we can get to that particular point of trust and truth, we can start to operate independently and not dependent upon other people's expert opinion or ideas or experiences. You know, in that particular part is the pathway that is walked by the lonely person, where they feel like they're alone. But the truth to me is where they're becoming all one. And when they're becoming all one and you become actualized within yourself, you then don't require other people to give to you, to provide to you. And when you're in a relationship, you love that person for who they are, not for what they can give to you. And that's where a lot of relationships are lost, when they aspire to this idea of love and freedom, but they're still not free within our own self. But this is not about, well, you know, you're no good. This is about recognizing, well, of course, yeah, well, I've got to have patience and I've got to have empathy for my own self. But yeah, well, that is the path I've gone down. That is what I've done. And I've learnt these things, but I don't understand those. So I'm going to start to understand it. I'm going to actually take steps, and it's not going to be easy, but I'm going to find them into such a point where I believe the truth within me is the truth, and I'm able to stand in that no matter what the consequences may be. So when I can do that, not just occasionally, but in the most, and I guarantee you, when you start to move down that path, you'll be tested to recognize and trust the path that you're on. So sovereignty then comes from a state of when we are able to identify our independence. Now, sovereignty as a definition out into the world, like as in a country, is independent of any other state. But we can relate that to, you know, energetically as well, in the further truth, is it's independent of any other state or influence. So it's as an individual in that particular part, we are independent, means that we are aware of all of the other states. We are recognizing of all those other states, which has allowed us to be independent. Independent doesn't mean screw you to everyone else. Independence can only come in the acceptance and recognition of everything else that is there. And until we accept that, we will not find that independence. See, many of us want to be independent by get out of my face, now I'm doing it my way, you know, you don't understand me, and fighting and not recognizing what exists outside of themselves. You know, this is the truth that we need to come to accept in our own life. If we do not come to accept our own independence, we will never be free. We'll never allow others to be free. We'll expect them to provide for us and be obligated into our life, and we'll complain about the way that they looked at us or what they said to us or the attention they didn't give us. We don't allow freedom for them, you know. So in moving into sovereignty, sovereignty is, I don't believe at any particular moment in this lifetime that we will ever get to a state of sovereignty. I believe that we're always approaching sovereignty. You know, the very part of our own being is in this contribution to life is, you know, I may have some things that I find brilliance in my life, but there's a whole range of my life that is a complete, what someone would consider is inadequate, a mess, or, you know, disorganized. But they're things where I don't choose to provide my attention into. You know, they're things that I find over the years don't serve me, and I'm happy for them to be the way that they are, because I then have the ability to focus on my own independence of what I want to bring, and my ability to accept other people and their independence. And see, that's where, you know, there's a commonality here of, you know, some questions that have been asked of me lately. Well, you know, why are people on the other side of me, you know, so angry? Like, how can they not see what is going on? Yeah. Now, I just wanted to touch on this because this is at the very root of dependency. And I've mentioned it before, it's about the inability to receive attention. Every physical construct, every energetic experience only exists because of the attention it receives. If we can navigate ourselves back to recognize how important attention is, what attention is, you will find the answers to everything that you have been seeking. You will find the truth within your own life. But the recognition is life force that people utilize as a word is just attention. Every single thing exists, whether it be beneficial or degenerative in your life, is because of the attention it is provided. it is not because of the structure it maintains. It's not because of its molecular dynamics. It's because of the attention it receives and it maintains. So I want to understand the reason why people, argue with you vehemently and, you're wrong and you're an idiot, or you support this guy. How can you, you're this, you're that. That vitriol, that is satisfying someone's inability to give themselves attention. And when you give it attention, it serves them. It's like a drug. It's a service that you provide. You go, I can't believe these people. Why do they keep doing that? They continue to be like that because you keep giving them attention. And as you keep giving them attention, their precise awareness, which many of us are not aware of, they will be sitting there at one stage where they stop attacking you, where they stop having a go at you. They will start again once you've let go of the attention. Once they stop receiving attention energetically from a distance, whether that's online or whatever it may be, those individuals will go in and then attack again because that's how they've learned to receive attention. This is a simple concept, but has been complicated by people wanting to argue about the indicators of life that, well, it was wrong what they said. Well, only if you give attention to what it is that they said. Only if you determine that to be wrong. There is also the opposite side of that where it may be right, but if you want to get caught up in that just to come back to a state of actualization, go for it. But the truth is, get on your own path and start moving in that direction and give yourself attention that you so desperately need in order to not get caught up in the disengagement of other people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I won't argue with you about any of that, Jason.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. I'm sure we can find an argument someday.
It's been a fascinating conversation today, and that's about us for time. So I really appreciate anyone listening in. It's really quite a unique conversation that not many people in the world are having at the moment. So thank you for listening, and Jason Reynolds, thank you for contributing this episode for the disease of dependency. It's been fascinating. This is number 5 in the series of 8. So please subscribe to us. We're on YouTube and BitChute. We're also on Patreon, and we're on all the podcast platforms. So Jason Reynolds, thank you for your time. We look forward to the next episode next week in relation to actualizing independence. Anything else you want to leave us?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you just for creating this space. I mean, this space that you have now and the people that are listening in and where this may go has not happened in the last couple of weeks or months. This is, obviously a part of your own life journey and the courage that you've had to do that. So I just want to really say thank you for providing the space to someone like me to have an opportunity to share that and for you to hold space for that as well. And share. I'd ask the people on here if you like it, share it. That's it. Only goes by that. It's put it out there. My intention is we're exposing a lot of this type of thing to hold space for people to move them through into process of their own independence and actualization, and not the complexities of many practices are out there. So anyway, I just want to say thank you.
No, thank you, Jason. I got the acknowledgement. Thank you. Yes, and anyone else that can share this information, please do. And hopefully that people, it reaches enough people that need it at this point in time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I will say one thing, Paul. We are putting together a mini course for people that want to just understand that. That'll be an opportunity for them to be able to explore what it is, the crazy concepts that we're sharing here, and how to actually embrace that themselves. So that'll be coming in the next coming weeks as well.
Okay, great. We look forward to talking about that further. So thank you for joining us. Jason Reynolds, to be continued.
Thanks, Paul. Have a beautiful day. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to another message from the underground. Want to know more? Head over to Facebook and search for our private Facebook group, Messages from the Underground, or visit www.messagesfromtheunderground.org. To connect with Paul Seils, please visit paulseils.com. Stay human, protect the planet, raise the consciousness.